We going? We good to go now? Okay, so these reflexive pronouns, ML2, ML2, ML ton, etc. Pretty straightforward, right? There's no nominative form, and their endings are just like what we're used to. Se'autu is of yourself. So se'autu, se'auto, se'auton, etc. The plural he'auton, he'autois, he'autus. Notice that the plural of emautu and se'autu are the same. And then the third person, you notice that one is first person, one is second person, and one is third person, right? Do you understand the whole person thing? First person, I, or we. Yeah. Second person, you, singular, plural. Third person, they. Yeah. So, if the person talking, if the person talking is doing the action, then it's first person, right? I went to the store. If the person being spoken to is doing the action, then it's second person. You went to the store. If it's somebody else, other than the person talking and other than the person being spoken to, then it's third person. He went to the store. So I am talking to you about him, and he went to the store. So first person, I'm talking, so I went to the store. Second person, you're listening, so you went to the store. Third person, he's not involved, so he went to the store. That's how that works. All right, so third person, he'autu, notice the rough breathing mark, he'auto, he'auton, etc. Here we have the neuter. We're assuming in the first and second person that a person talking is a person, so masculine or feminine. You have Balaam's donkey, but that's pretty rare. Same thing if you're talking to someone, hopefully, if you're sane, it's also another person, so masculine, feminine. But a third person could be neuter. Right? That dog rolled over on himself or something like that. The plural of this is the same as the plural of the others, so all of those forms are ambiguous. All right? So I think it'll be clear when you read that how to deal with those. The declension of pos means all or every or whole. So pos, pantos, panti, panta, pasa, pases, passe, pasan, feminine, pan, pantos, panti, pan. Just notice that there's some ambiguous forms. We're used to the ambiguity of the nominative and accusative forms in the neuter, right? We're used to that. But just remember, there is an ambiguity between the masculine accusative singular and the neuter nominative and accusative plural. See the ambiguity there? So how are you going to tell which is which? Context. That's right. Okay. Now you have to connect a little bit. You have to connect a little bit to the uses of the term pos. All right. So first of all, number one. In the very common predicate position, its meaning corresponds closely to the English. So, he'oraka panta ta ploya. I have seen, and if in other words, if you just translate these, one by one, you're going to get the sense. I have seen all the boats. All right. Number two, in the less common attributive position, it refers to the whole, the collective sum of the individual parts. So here in the attributive position, ha, pas, namos, the whole law. And even if you translated it all the law, that's not very good English, isn't it? All the law teaches love. Well, it's better in English, the whole law teach as well. It's just telling us what sounds better in English or what is more acceptable or proper in English. Somewhere in here he almost mentions our rule of telling the difference between attributive and predicate position. And I'm not seeing it right here, but if we read this closely we would see it. What is our rule for determining attributive and predicate position? The noun has the article and the modifier does not. It's predicate position. All other cases are attributed. So here in our first example, what's the noun? Ploya. Does it have the article? Yes. What's the modifier? Panta. Does it have the article? No. Predicate position. In the next example, what's the noun? Namas. Does it have the article? No. So it has to be attributive position. And it is. All right. Number 3, without the article, pos means every or each with a singular noun. With a plural noun, it means all, again. All right. So every word will be fulfilled. That's singular, right? The sin entered into all men or persons. Number 4, pos often occurs with personal pronouns, demonstratives, and participles. So, you all know the truth. That's what they say in Texas. Huh? Y'all. That could be all y'all. Yeah, all y'all know the truth. That's probably emphatic, isn't it? All y'all. Well, see, that's one of those idioms, isn't it? And you need to understand the New Testament's full of idioms, so you really have to be careful. We can make a lot of great theological points on the basis of idioms, and they don't work because they're idioms, right? And 5, pos is often used as a substantive. What does that mean? What pos is used as a substantive?
Like all, and then things, like things would be.
All right, but what's a substantive? Like a noun. And how is it that pos can be used like a noun? Well, because it's an adjective. And adjectives can be used substantively. Even if you have an adjectival participle, it can be used substantively. Right? So here's the example. Pos is often used as a substantive, both with and without the article. So, a pen ha didaskalos. So the teacher said to them, the teacher spoke to them all things in parables. And all marveled upon the signs. All marveled at the signs. Or everyone, as the translation here says, everyone marveled upon the signs. Now here we have epi with the dative, right? Everyone marveled on the basis of the signs. Well, it gives you the basis. It gives you the basis for their marveling, doesn't it? The foundation of it. What foundation do you have for marveling? The signs. All right. So in this one, what I'd like you to do for the practice and review, we're going to switch it up a little bit. So write this down. For the practice and review, I'd like you to do every third one. So you can do 3, 6, 9, 12, and 15. In the practice and review. In the New Testament, do every third one as well. So you will do 3, 5, sorry, every third one. 3, 6, 9. You know, the low carb thing messes with your mind. You know, I didn't get toast for breakfast. And this should be recorded on the camera. I didn't get toast for breakfast. My wife did not give me toast for breakfast. Now I'm not thinking straight. 3, 6, 9 is what you'll do for the, in the New Testament. When they do number 1 in the English to Greek. That almost cuts it in half, by the way, if you think about that, because you know, we had 10 and 11, and you'd had to do 11. Well, do the math, but it almost cuts it in half, even though it's only every third instead of every other one. All right, there's a reason though. Don't get too excited. All right. All right, we need a break, I assume. So, can we begin again at 8:30, please? Deal there. Lesson 22. All right, here we go. Alelon.
Alelon.
Of each other, of one another. You can look up the passages in the New Testament that use alelon and choose some of them. And I've never done it, but you could do it. You could do a series on the one another passages of Scripture. And the New Testament, one another, is a concept that always applies to Christians. Kind of interesting.
You think that all alone would not necessitate more than one person being there.
All alone. Yeah, there you go. That's funny. All right, next one. Apangelo.
Apangelo.
I report, I announce. Dakeo.
Dakeo.
I think, I seem. Hekastos. Each or every. Emas. Emas, eme, emon. My. Excuse me. Excuse me. All right. Thank you. Entele. Commandment. Hemeteros. Our. Hapu. Where or whither. Pesumai. Here's the principal part. I will fall from pipto. So pipto, pesumai, right? Proskuneo. I worship, I bow down. Interesting word, that word worship. The essential meaning of worship is to bow down, to submit to God. Worship is not about warm feelings. We make that mistake, don't we? We think we equate warm feelings about God with worship. The essential core of worship is to submit to God. And the idea is when we come in a ritual setting, and even though we don't necessarily always literally bow down, maybe we should, I don't know. We come in a ritual setting and we express our submission to God, right, in church, and we go live our submission to God outside of church. So there is ritual worship, and there's everyday worship. But it all has at its core the idea of submission to God. A little interesting to think about the difference between worship and praise, too. They're not the same thing. Yes?
Is there a noun form of worship?
Not in the Old Testament. Think about that. The Old Testament Hebrew, if I'm remembering the word right, it's kavah. Kavah, found in the hitpa'el stem in the Old Testament. There is not a noun for worship in the Old Testament. Now, is there a noun in the New Testament? That's a great question. Let me think about that. I don't know. Maybe not. I'd have to get back with you on that.
Okay.
Could be. Probably won't learn anything by looking in here. No, that's a good question. All right, the next one. Puros. Fire. Sauce. Say song. Your. Spero. I sow. Tereo. I keep, I observe, I obey. Hudor. Hudatas. Water. Humeteros. Your. Phos. Photos. Light. That's not a hard one to remember, is it? Now, let me not be misunderstood about worship. I think worship ought to involve our whole being, our mind, our emotions, and our will. But the essential focus of worship is a submission of the will. We submit our will because we understand something that is true. We understand truth. that we submit our will because we are motivated by our emotions, right? So our mind and our emotions have to be involved in it, but the essential nature of worship is submission of the will. And so if we're not submitting our will, then we're not worshiping. See what I mean? Okay, introduction to liquid verbs. What's a liquid verb? It's a verb whose stem ends in lambda, mu, nu, or rho. You've heard me use this term before. Liquid letters, right? Liquid letters, the way they're formed with your mouth is kind of moving when you say it, and you can sustain them like a vowel. You know, most consonants you can't sustain. I mean, how long can you say right? But lambda, you can sustain that. And your mouth is moving when you say lambda, kind of slides across the lips. So liquid letter, lambda, mu, nu, rho. The bottom line problem with these is you can't have a sigma after them, right? And many of our temporal infixes or tense indicators are sigmas. So if I have a stem that ends in a liquid letter, like meno, for example, if I get to the future form, I want to put a so on the end of that, the sigma drops out, and I end up with meno. Accent change. And this is another one of those rare places, relatively rare places, where accent matters in recognizing a form. So look down at the bottom of the page. We know the word meno, right? That would have an accent over the epsilon. It would have an acute accent over the epsilon. You know what I'm saying? Meno, present tense. Meno, future tense. You see that? So in liquid letters, the sigma is going to be dropping out. We talked about that in the formation of the endings for the participle and the third declension. Remember that? And here we have it with these verbs.
Since the accents weren't in the original, it's just context.
Yeah. It's just context.
So eventually, like we should learn that for now, but eventually we should forget it and just always do it by context.
No. You'd probably be hard pressed to find a place where they got the accent wrong. Indeed.
So you shouldn't base any theological understanding on the accent.
If context is ambiguous.
Right. Well, I mean, it should be based on context.
Yeah, I suppose that's true. But I'm not aware of, I'm not remembering any issues where that's the case. I mean, to distinguish between the present tense and the future tense is probably not that difficult to do in the context. You know what I mean? But yeah, that's true. All right, in the future middle of meno, notice that. Menumai, mene, what's happening? With these endings, you have a contraction happening, right? And you see that in paragraph 155 on page 131. The future of liquid verbs is formed by adding an epsilon suffix to the verb stem prior to the person number ending. The epsilon contracts, however, with the variable vowel of the ending, with the result that the future active and middle of a liquid verb resemble the present active and middle passive of a contract verb in eo. The future active of meno I remains as follows. And that's why you get some strange kind of forms with this. Look at the plural. Menumen, right, is a little bit different. Meneta is different. In the middle passive, there are even more. There are more different forms. Instead of amai, you have umai. Etai instead of etai, and etc. But just be aware of this, make a note of it in your mind, and know what's going on with these liquid verbs. All right. First aorist of liquid verbs, looking at meno again. We have an augment, me, na, So the stem has changed, lengthened, the epsilon has lengthened, kind of to compensate for the lack of the sigma. The sigma's dropped out and you have the alpha ending. All right? So you can see, as it says in that paragraph below that, some liquid verbs have second aorist, balo, ebalon, or regular aorist, pharaoh, ain, ka. That's a kappa first aorist there, by the way. Forms of common liquid verbs: iro, aro, ara. See the sigma dropping out of those. So you can go through there and see apangelo, lambda being a liquid letter, goes to apangelo for the future. Notice we don't have two lambdas, so that's not an ambiguous form there, really, is it? We have two lambdas in the present stem because of the durative aspect of the present tense. Aorist, apangela, and so there we have a lengthening of the epsilon, dropping out of that one lambda, and so on. What's happening with apothnesco, and he notes this, apothenon, is that the stem is really apothon. And we have the sigma kappa added in the present stem. All right, but you can look through those, and it's fairly evident what's going on. All right, here we have the reciprocal pronoun 158. The reciprocal pronoun is used when there is mutual interaction between members of a plural subject. By the nature of the word, there is no nominative, so they're all plural, and there's no nominative. In Biblical Greek, the most common forms are the following: allelon, allelois, allelus. So, elegon, pros, allelus, they were talking to one another. We are eating bread with one another. Do you have love for one another? All right. That note's interesting. The three masculine forms given above are the only forms found in the New Testament. Feminine and neuter forms, allelais, allelah, sometimes occur in the Septuagint. Okay, possessive adjectives. We're used to showing possession by just using a noun in the genitive or a pronoun in the genitive or the like. But you can also use a possessive adjective to show possession. You can see that in the middle of that paragraph in the bottom of page 133. Emas, sauce, heteros, and hooteros. Right? So emas is mine, sauce is yours, heteros is ours, and humeteros is yours, plural. And they just decline like regular adjectives would decline. You know, os, u, o, on, a, and on, u, o, on, etc. So that's kind of really just a vocabulary issue. The possessive adjective has to agree with the noun that it modifies in gender, number, and case. So ta eman biblion. If it's my book, then my agrees with book in gender, number, and case. My doesn't agree with me in gender, number, and case. Right? So I sold my book. I would be in the nominative singular case. Well, let's say it differently. I sold my books. I is in the nominative singular case in that sentence, right? But if I'm using a possessive adjective, then my books is going to be in the neuter plural to rhyme or to agree in gender, number, and case with the noun that modifies. You see what I mean? You may not follow that. That's a pretty cool chapter, isn't it? Because it's short. Okay, so I want you to do every third one of the practice and review there too. Do every third one in the New Testament. Do the first one in the English to Greek. For next time. And what I would also like you to do for next time is looking at 1 John. Let me see. I'd like you to work on translating 1 John 1, 5 to 10. See how far you can get with that. You know, if it's killing you and you can't do it all, okay, but see how far you can get with it. All right. Okay, let's take our Bibles now, and we need to finish what we started in John chapter 3. And then we'll go to 1 John. If you look at John chapter 3, verse 14, what does the word kathos mean? Have we had that yet? As or just as. Okay, very good. So kai, kathos, moouses. Have you had that vocabulary yet? Moouses? Moses, there you go. So, and just as Moses hupsosin. Huh? Lifted up. Now, look at that. What kind of verb is this? Now, that's a bad question, and when you want to be a good teacher, you can't ask bad questions, and that's a bad question because it has a lot of right answers, right? What kind of verb is this? But thinking of the kinds of verbs we learned about tonight, what kind of verb is this?
Contract?
It's a contract verb. Excellent. Very good. See? Now, what is the contract vowel of this verb? Omicron. You know that. Now, if it were an eta, we wouldn't necessarily know whether it was epsilon or alpha. But this is an omega lengthened from an omicron because it comes before a temporal infix sigma. So hupsosen, what's it from? Hupsao. Very good. And how would you parse it? Huh?
So I cheated.
You cheated?
Yeah, it's at the bottom.
With the Bible you cheated?
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. Okay. All right. Hupsao. How would you parse it? That's not on the bottom, is it?
No. Hupsao is just the...
Yeah, hupsao is the vocabulary form. But how do you parse hupsosen? Or hupsosen, really?
Well, is that going to be third plural?
It's going to be third plural. Absolutely. Hmm? Now, you know this. This is not hard. Okay, what are the future endings? Is it future? Nope. It's aorist. What are the aorist endings?
Sa, se, or sen.
Sa, se. Saman, sadi, sam.
So it's third singular.
It's third singular.
Okay, someone said third plural.
No.
I said
It's. Did I say it was third plural?
Yeah.
Oh, I made a mistake. I bought it with you and you led me astray. I gotta be more careful with you guys.
Yeah, so I was sitting there trying to think of a tense where the third plural.
I'm sorry, then I didn't help you. It's not. It's third singular. I have got to have an apple before I teach this class next time. It's third singular. It's difficult to augment something that begins with an upsilon, so we don't have the augment showing up here. So just as Moses lifted up, ton often. Office is a vocabulary word, isn't it? Which means serpent. What case is this? Accusative. It's a direct object. Just as Moses lifted up the serpent ente eremo in the desert. This is a feminine noun of the second declension. Don't you love that? Remember that one? Just as Moses, see, they weren't making this stuff up. This stuff really happens in the Bible, right? Feminine nouns of the second declension. Just as Moses lifted up the serpent in the desert. Now, there's a little reference to the story of Moses doing this in the Old Testament. What happened? Tell me the story.
Numbers, right?
Numbers? Yes, sir.
Numbers 21.
Yep. What? What happened?
And when the people were grumbling, so God sent snakes.
All right.
And,
God sent snakes, and the snakes were biting the people, and they were
dying.
dying. And they cried out to Moses, and Moses, fiery snakes, that's right. And Moses cries out to God, and God says,
Raise up
make a brazen serpent, raise it up on a standard, and when the people look in faith to that brazen serpent, then they will be saved, and they will not die.
Does it say in faith?
Well, I don't know. It just says they won't die.
It just says look, I mean, yeah, just look.
So that leads to more questions.
Yeah. Well, maybe I'm embellishing a little. But, I'm sure there had to be faith involved in looking. I would think. I don't think if they accidentally looked at it, that it would really work. Why did I live? I don't remember it, but I must have seen that. I don't think it was like that.
Well, maybe they looked at it and they didn't know if it would work, but it worked anyway. That could be.
Could be.
They believed, but they didn't have much faith.
Well, they had to believe enough to try it,
Yep.
at least. All right, so that's the story. And so just as Moses lifted up the serpent in the wilderness, hutos, thus or so. So, now here our word order is not helping us. Now we got to go over to day, the last word of this line. Day, what does that mean? It is necessary, and we're looking for an infinitive to complete that, right? It is necessary to, and now I have hupsothenai. What is that?
To lift up, so it was saying that one, just
Yeah, how would you parse that? It's from the same word we just had.
It's an infinitive.
It's an aorist passive infinitive. Ain. I'm giving you all the infinitive endings now, at least the present and aorist. Ain, esai, sai, sasai, thanai. That's what we have. So it is necessary to be lifted up, ton huion, the Son of Man. Now, you're going to learn this later, but I'll tell you tonight. So don't remember this and don't learn this now, because this is for later. But now infinitives are in infinitives and not finite. They're infinitives because they're not limited by person and number, right? So they're not limited by person and number. They're verbals. They're verbal nouns, but they can't have a subject, right? Because they're not limited by person and number. It's just to lift up. All right, but really, in the Greek language, you can indicate that which does the action of the infinitive, and that word, that noun that's doing the action of the infinitive, will be in the accusative case. So you can say that you always have to say, quote unquote, subject of an infinitive, because it really isn't the subject, because they can't have them, they're infinitive. The subject of the infinitive will be indicated in the accusative case, because what it is, it's an accusative of reference, right? So, to sin with reference to John. Well, John sinned, right? Well, you can also have a direct object of the action of an infinitive. And what case is that going to be in? Accusative. So both are in the accusative case. Here we have ton huion, and it is related to the infinitive, but how? Is it the subject of the infinitive, or is it the direct object of the infinitive? This is almost a trick question. What is the voice of the infinitive? Passive. So it's the Son. So the Son is you always have to say, quote unquote, subject of this infinitive. So it is necessary to be lifted up with reference to the Son of Man. Well, it is necessary for the Son of Man to be lifted up. Right? So that's what we have. So let's read this sentence all together. And just as Moses lifted up the serpent in the desert, so also it is necessary for the Son of Man to be lifted up. So somehow there's a connection between Jesus. Now what are we talking about? We're talking about the Son of Man being lifted up. We're talking about the crucifixion. So
You know, is there any place in the Bible that talks about lifting up Jesus, not referring to the crucifixion? So it's kind of funny when we talk about, you know, let's lift up Jesus. If we're trying to use biblical terminology, we got to think about that maybe, right? Well, you know, we don't want to be too radical. But anyway, here Jesus is lifted up. That means crucified. Just as Moses lifted up the serpent in the wilderness. That's kind of interesting, isn't it? Verse 15 says, in order that, so it's necessary for the Son of Man to be lifted up, in order that, pos. We know pos now. I mean, don't you want to just jump up and down in your seat because you know this now? Right? Pos. What is pos? All. But with a singular substantive, as we have here. Every. In order that every pistuo, one believing, so it's a substantive because we have an adjectival participle used substantively. Huh? That ought to scare you that you understand that. It ought to scare you more if you don't understand it. But, okay, right, adjectival participle used substantively, pistuo, the one believing. So, in order that everyone believing, what? In him, eke, strange ending, because it's subjunctive. We haven't had that yet. We will. I got to just put a might on the front of it. So how would you translate it? In order that everyone believing in him might have life everlasting, or eternal, you might translate it that way. Life with reference to the ages. Well, actually that's probably singular, so life with reference to the age, or whatever. It's an idiom. It just means, you know, everlasting life. Right? Okay, now we get to a famous verse. I bet you think you could translate this, huh? Hutos. Thus, or so. This is an adverb of manner. For, how does it go? For God so loved the world. What do you think that so means? For God so loved the world. Hmm? In this way? Well, we want to think that for God so loved the world. We want to think that God loved the world so much that he sent Jesus, right? Now, that's not untrue, is it? But is that really what this verse is saying? For in this way, God loved. Now, what word do we have? Hey, this is exciting. I mean, you know, you could just jump up and down in your chair constantly. Don't, because you'll wear yourself out. Agapesen. Now we know this. What is that? That's the eros of love. What's the word for love? Agapao. Okay, so our alpha has lengthened to an eta because it's before a temporal infix. Sen, we just saw that aorist ending, right? We have the alpha at the beginning of agapao, lengthening for the augment. I mean, it's classic, isn't it? This is a perfect, classic, regular contract verb right here. And we can deal with it. We love this, don't we? Right? For God in this way, now God, right, ha theos, we know that, that's the subject. For God in this way loved ton cosmon. What case is that? Accusative. Why? Direct object. Okay, so for in this way God loved the world, hoste. So that, that's an adverb of result. Hutos is an adverb of manner. Hosta is an adverb of result. So the result of God loving the world in this way is, with the result that ton huihan, the Son, ton monogene, the one of a kind, right? Mono means what? One. Genes means kind, right? So one of a kind. So that the one of a kind Son, edoken. Well, this is didomi, it's a me verb. You haven't had that yet. I'll tell you what this is. This is an aorist. So, didomi, which means I give, third singular. Aorist, active to give, third singular. So this means he gave. With the result that he gave the unique Son. Sometimes you can have an article used with possessive sort of force, and you might say that it's used in this way here because which son did he give? His son, his unique son, right? Not just any son; it's the son. And so when you talk about the son, not a son, but the son, then it has to be his son, right? So if you translated it his son, you could justify that based on the possessive use of the article, right? Well, that's next year's Greek. But in a verse as simple as John 16, you need to know some of next year's Greek, right? So what do we have so far? For in this way God loved the world, with the result that he gave the unique son, hina, in order that. This is an adverb of purpose. Hina. Right? So why did he do this? In order that, pas hapistuon, everyone believing, into him, well in English, in him, right? Now, here we go. May is not used outside the indicative mood. If we have a participle, we'd have to use may with it, right? Well, here we have a subjunctive, not an indicative, but a subjunctive. Okay, this is from apalumi. This is an aorist middle subjunctive, right? Third singular from apalumi. This is an odd word to parse. If you look up apalumi, it's going to give you a ton of forms because apalumi does weird things. If you look up apalumi in a dictionary, you're going to see forms similar to this. But in order that everyone believing in him might not perish, all but yeah, the alpha dropped out because of the epsilon that comes after in the next word, but might have zoane ionion, everlasting life. Now, here's the thing. In classical Greek, there is a construction, there is a hutos hosta construction, right? And in that hutos hosta construction, it means somebody did something so much, that this was the result. I love donuts so much that I ate 5 of them. Classical Greek construction, right? However, John is anything but classical Greek. John is very simple Greek. Classical Greek is more complex Greek. Now, if you want to argue, if you were in Luke, you might argue that this is a classical construction. If you're in the book of Hebrews, you might argue this is a classical construction. Is this probably influenced by a classical construction? Probably. But in this context, I don't think that what is at the fore here is that God loved the world so much that he gave his son. God says, do I love the world enough? Yeah, I do. Let's give Jesus. I don't think that's what's at the fore here, especially in light of the context, right? There's a whole lot of things in the context before that are wanting to connect with this verse, right? So, in this way, God loved the world. Now the question then is, in what way did God love the world?
Lifting up Christ in a way that Moses.
All right. In the same way that God loved Israel, on this occasion with the serpent, in a physical sense, you could say, right? In the same way God loved Israel, who sinned, and as a result of their sin, they were dying, and they deserved it, right? But God was moved by compassion and gave a way out. So in the same way God loved Israel in this physical way, as the story illustrates, in this way God loved the world. So God sees the world having sinned and now dying because of it, and deserving to die because of it. If you're preaching this, you can make a big deal out of the fact that,
Yeah, what our sin does to us is like what a poisonous snake does to our body. What sin does to your soul is like what a poisonous snake does to your body. Right? You could drive that point home, couldn't you? There's a parallel between those circumstances. So this thing that happened to Israel is a physical picture of a spiritual reality. Remember, if I spoke to you of spiritual things, how would you understand it? I'm speaking to you of physical things. You must be born again. And so he's saying, remember Moses? Saying to Nicodemus, remember the context. Remember Moses and what that physical thing that happened when those snakes bit people and they were physically dying? Well, it's like that spiritually. Like God loved Israel in that case, like that, God loved the world. And it's interesting because here Jesus is, right? He's the Son, and he hasn't been crucified yet, but here he is saying this, with the result that he gave the unique Son. Now, they had a serpent then. Now, and that serpent is a type of Christ, isn't it? Is a shadowy picture of Christ. And that whole circumstance with Israel is a type of the human spiritual condition, isn't it? It's a physical, shadowy picture of a spiritual reality. And so he gave the unique Son in order that. So, in this way, in what way? Like God loved the children of Israel in that snake story. And what's the result of God loving the world? That he gave his Son. I think that's the point. So it isn't so much God so loved the world. It is, here's how God loved the world. God loved the world in that he acted in mercy and grace when he could have acted in justice. God acted in mercy and grace when the world was sinning and dying as a result of it. And God intervened and what? Provided life. Provided a chance at life through faith, right? And that's why I'm embellishing a little bit, but is it really embellishing? You can probably argue on the basis of this passage that it was by faith that those people looked at that snake and ended up being saved, just as it's by faith we look to Jesus as he's lifted up and have eternal life. So John 3:16, really, when you read it in Greek, we think we're very familiar with it. But when we read even John 3:16 in Greek, it becomes very powerful. And
I have a question.
yeah,
Why can't we translate it this way?
because it doesn't sell.
Are you being serious?
Mhm. If you're
Is the
going to
Amplified Bible
If you're going to
spelled-
translate the Bible, right? If you're going to translate the Bible and you're serious about getting your translation out, you want it to sell. Where's it going to sell? In bookstores, right? In Christian bookstores, at Christian Supply, or a CBD, or whatever, right? And you have a new translation. You have a new international version, or whatever, right? You know, and that's what, isn't it the new NIV the best-selling translation now, or was? You want it to sell. And besides that, you're a business. You're Zondervan. And you're in it to make money. You got to pay the bills, right?
Wouldn't Erdman's publish it?
You are going to put out a translation, and people are going to say, wow, look at this new translation. I wonder what this is like. Where's the first place they're going to go, likely, to look and see how this translation works? John 3:16, right? All right? Now, if John 3:16, the King James says, for God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whosoever believes in him should not perish, but have everlasting life. What do you think the New American Standard is going to say?
It's funny because the eSword, you know about the eSword? It's a
About the what?
The eSword, it's a free Bible study program that you can download on the internet, and they have all kinds of different versions listed. I mean, there's probably 50 versions, and each one it gives you what it says in John 3:16.
See, there you go then. There you go. What does the New American Standard say?
Says you should listen to his next. It's
Yeah.
good. It says, for God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whoever believes in him shall not perish, but have eternal life.
Okay, so it's just little update, little change. We went from whosoever to whoever.
So where did the
Yeah,
begotten
last
come
time.
from?
I'll tell you that in a minute. Okay.
English Standard Version does have a footnote that says it might be, this is how God loves the world.
Is that right?
So,
So we're not making this stuff up here.
up in the text it says, "For God so loved the world."
See, and that proves the point right there. They know what it should say, but they're not going to say it because it will never sell. People will look at this Bible and go, "Oh, hey, this Bible's wrong," right? So they got to put in the text, "For God so loved the world," and they'll put in a little note that says, it could mean.
Yeah, well, we were talking with Dr. House about why they don't translate the Old Testament name Yahweh, and he said because they tried it, but it doesn't sell.
I do have a Bible in the Old Testament that does do that, but yeah, it's not. I don't even remember the version of it, and I own it, so yeah, it's not very popular. I got it in Israel actually, but
I want a Bible to not translate the book of James. I think it should be Jacob.
well, I had a guy in our church in Sandy when I was a youth pastor there, and his name was Jim, and he named his boy Jacob. And one day I said, you named your boy the same name you had. What? He was shocked. He didn't want that. Well, it really isn't in English, but yeah, in Greek. But you need to understand that there are financial considerations, and what are you going to do when you get in ministry? I mean, don't be too hard on these translators because you're going to make a living. If you're paid to be in ministry, you might not just go change the rest of those pews to chairs, even though that might be the right thing to do, right? Seriously. I mean, I'm not kidding. That might be a stupid thing to do. In one sense, if you look at that purely logically, well, clearly we should change those pews to chairs, right? I mean, all you got to do is walk in the sanctuary and go, it's obvious, isn't it? But that's not the only way you got to look at it. You got to look at is it going to cause a fight and is it worth it? And how much are we, when we go home and look at our darling wife and our little children running around the house and the bills on the counter, how much are we going to be motivated in what we do, by that paycheck? And you know what? If you're not motivated at all, you're stupid because you won't be in ministry long. Bottom line. It's attention, isn't it? Right? Now, Pastor Joe and I or any of us in ministry could go out tomorrow and do the right thing and lose our job because of it. Right? And then we got to explain to our wife exactly why that was the right thing.
Unless you don't have a wife.
Or we can do a lot of right things and keep our job and keep our check. Well, that's why very seriously, that's why a lot of people start churches. But I'll give you a number of guys who started a church in Phoenix, and ask him if that's always a solution to this, because it's not. People come into your church from other churches. So oftentimes with a new church, people who are problem people because they can't get along in the church, they just left, and they come and they expect whatever, and they give you all kinds of hassle.
I got some guys I can send to you when you're ready.
So again,
Oh,
politics.
not Cyrus. I wouldn't do that to you.
Politics. You got to be aware of politics and understand it. And that's sad. That's a sad thing, but it's just reality. It's just reality. So, you can work really hard and put a translation together and mess up John 3:16 and nobody's going to have it. Is that what you want? And life is full of choices like that, isn't it?
How would you teach this then in your church? Without turning people off to, well, I can't trust my Bible because it says we're not so love the world. It's in this way.
Well, exactly. And that's an awesome question.
So can mean in this way. So can mean in this way. And
Well, so what does the so mean? And I might talk about that. I might talk about that little word "so." For God so loved the world. And I would say something like that. Little word is really packed with meaning. I want to show you how that little word is packed with meaning. For God so loved the world. I have in my mind that this really is a classical construction, and there's probably a influence behind this. And say, does it mean, is it talking about how much God loved the world? And I draw it out. The God so loved the world, that all of a sudden he decided he loved the world so much that he needed to send Jesus. Is that what it means? Well, there's a bit of that there, but let me tell you something else that's there in that little word "so." God loved the world in a particular way. Can you tell me what way God loved the world? God loved the world in a particular way. How did God love the world? Well, let me tell you a little story, an experience that Moses had. Tell the story of Moses. That's how God loved the world. The way God loved Israel on that day when they were dying in the desert because they sinned and they deserved to die. But because of God's love, he intervened and provided a way of salvation. The way God loved Israel in the desert on that day is the way God loved the world the day Jesus was born. I hate it when people say, if you can't preach that, get another job. But, I mean, that preaches, doesn't it? You can go. So I'm not going to go through all this, about, well, your translation's wrong and it's because they wanted you to buy it. So I'm not going to say, I'm not going to be cynical like that with people.
Well, my professor said this in class. His name is Steve Stanley.
Here's his email.
Yeah. But I didn't. Now the thing I enjoy about teaching Greek students in seminary is I can talk to you. I can say things to you that I don't want to say at church. And here's what I can say to you that I don't want to say at church. I can say to you, this is an adverb of manner. Now maybe in a Sunday school class. I mean, I got to be honest with you. At my church, I can get away with stuff because these people are something else. These people blow me away. I can teach my people on a Bible college level, and they eat it up. It blows me away that that's true, but I really can. But typically, I'm not going to be using that kind of language at church. This is an adverb of manner. I'm not going to say that. See, I can kind of pull out the stop with you guys and say, hey, this is an adverb of manner, right? Instead of using the term, that's shorthand. I'm gonna unshorten it and put it back into longhand. I'm not gonna say this is an adverb of manner. I'm gonna say this little word "so" is telling us how God loved the world. Did you ever wonder how it was that God loved the world? This little word "so" is telling us this, and it's so important because this little word "so" connects us to a different part of this passage. I mean, how are you gonna go? You're gonna go at it. It might take me a minute to say the same thing as I've said when I say this is an adverb of manner, right? But I'm going to do it in a way. Here's the thing. When you're teaching or preaching people, what's your first job? What's your first job when you're teaching or preaching?
Study.
Hmm?
Learn. Apply it to yourself.
Well, see, that's another bad question because there are a lot of right answers. But I'll tell you what your first job is. Your first job is to keep people's attention. That's your first job. What's your last job? Tell them the truth. Well, the first thing you got to do is keep their attention. And the last thing you want to do is tell them I don't mean the last thing you want to do, but I mean, your last job is, see how language gets you? The last thing that you need to do is tell them the truth. Why is keeping their attention your first job? Because you can tell them all the truth you want to, and if they're not paying attention, at best, you've not accomplished anything. Probably you have accomplished something negative. You have taught them again to tune out when we're talking about the Bible. Do not let people tune out when you're talking about the Bible. Your first job is to keep people's attention. How do you do that? You have got to be relevant. You've got to grab them. You've got to reach out and grab people by the collar and say, you're going to listen to me. How are you going to do that? You've got to make them know that they're going to listen to this because they have to. They can't not listen to you. Nothing drives me nuts like somebody sleeping in a sermon. They do it. It's all of us. But I'm telling you, your first job is to get their attention. And you got to do that by being relevant, by giving them something that's going to move them. At the end of the day, you got to move people. I really should say in the middle is the truth, and the last job is you're going to move them, right? You're going to move people someplace. Because even if you tell them the truth and you haven't moved them someplace, you've really not done a whole lot, right? So as important as the truth is, at the end of the day, whatever you've done, if it hasn't involved the truth of God's word, you've wasted your time again, right? But we focus so much on the truth, which you might say is the meat of the sandwich, that we forget to put the bread on it. And that's a pretty messy sandwich, and it doesn't work too well. Your first job is to get their attention, and your second job is to move them to someplace. Where are you taking them? You see what I mean? So, you understand some truth in this text, and then you're going to, what I want to do is I want to move people with that truth. First thing I have to do is grab their attention, and if I start using word like adverb of manner, I'm saying to them, adverb of manner, go to sleep. Adverb of manner, don't listen to me. Adverb of manner, think about your business instead of what I'm talking about, right? Think about lunch, right? So I'm excited about some truth, but now I got to think about, okay, how am I going to grab these people, get their attention, get them to listen to this truth? How am I going to present it in a way that moves them and lets them know intellectually, emotionally, and volitionally, right? All those things. Just like my worship service, I'm shooting for the mind, the heart, and the will. In my sermon, I'm shooting for the mind, the heart, and the will. All the time. And I'm always working on that. I'm always working on doing that. Doing it well, because it's really, really hard. Speaking to people effectively is an incredibly difficult thing to do. And I don't suppose a person ever stops working on that, do you think?
Yes, some do.
Well, some do, but you shouldn't. The good
Absolutely.
ones don't. I don't suppose the good ones ever stop working on how to do that well. I'm glad Pastor Joe's in the class, because he can tell you I'm not just making this stuff up, right?
You're right.
All right, let's look at 1 John real quick so that we can get you to your paragraph. Page 531. Sorry, 533. Yeah, if you're in the right Bible.
See on the right Bible, it's not.
What page is it? 530 something, isn't it? What is it? Oh, 8 something? Okay. All right. Anyway, let's begin. Let's begin. 1 John 1:1. Ha. That's a relative pronoun. Okay. It means that which. You haven't had that yet. But relative pronouns and articles are very closely related, both in their formation and history and in their usage. But you could even say the one, which would be a good translation for just an article sitting there, right? But that which was. Now, kind of funny, because we have the same kind of verb form in John 1:1, don't we? Right? That which was op arches. From that which was from the beginning. That which ake ka amen. Probably should know that. That's right. That is from akuo, and it's a perfect, right? It's in perfect active indicative, first plural. That which we heard. That which we have seen, from harao, heoraka. That which we have seen, tois ophthalmois. With our eyes. What case do you think that's in? Dative form. Instrumental case, right? Dative, locative, instrumental. DLI. Instrumental case. All right. That which we have seen with our eyes. Remember, some people are going to say it's a dative of instrument. That's fine. It doesn't matter. You're talking about the same thing. That's not. We have big wars over whether we have 5 cases or 8 cases. We're just trying to describe a language, right? But somewhere along the line, you're going to get to the idea of instrument. We used our eyes to see. That which we have seen with our eyes, that which theosamatha, that which we have beheld. Okay, what tense is that, by the way? Aorist. All right, good. That which we beheld, and high keres, our hands epse la phason. Our hands handled, aorist, concerning the word of life. Okay, so let's read it all together. That which was from the beginning, that which we have heard, that which we have seen with our eyes, that which we beheld and our hands handled concerning the word of life. You got to stop and think about that for a second. This is John, the Apostle John. Maybe the only person to ever put his head into the bosom of Christ. Right? I mean, he's talking about
the second person of the Godhead, the Word of life, we rubbed shoulders with. We touched him, we saw him, we heard him. Now that's a concept that's just worth going home and meditating on, isn't it? All right, so that's what he's saying. And now we have a little parenthesis, verse 2. And the life was made manifest. How would you parse that? Phanerao, contract verb. This is easy. Aorist, passive, indicative, third singular from phanerao. And the life was made manifest, and we have beheld, and we, what tense? Martu rumen. This is martureo, right? One of those Valley Girl contract verbs, martureo. Right? What tense? Do we have contraction?
Yeah.
Yep. Do we have an augment?
Yes. No.
No, must be
Present.
present. All right. So, beginning of verse 2 again. And the life was made manifest, and we have seen, and we are bearing witness, and we are what? That's one of our vocabulary words, isn't it? Isn't it? Yeah. We are proclaiming, declaring, or announcing, any of those words, to you the life, the eternal life, which, the hatis is a relative pronoun and an indefinite pronoun stuck together. Hatis, which was with the Father and made manifest, we just saw that word, to us. Now, you can't help but think of the Gospel of John here, right? What does he call Jesus? The life eternal. And the Word, but the Word of life and announced to you. So we have seen and we have been witnessed and announced to you eternal life. The eternal life, which was, what was with the Father and made manifest to us? The eternal life. He's calling Jesus the eternal life. Right? See, a lot of things to meditate on here, right? All right, now, end of parenthesis, verse 3. Which we have seen and we have heard, that which we have seen and that which we have heard, understood, we announce also to you. So where does this message come from? His experience with Jesus. Exactly, what he saw and heard. All right, we announced to you. In order that, purpose, right? In order that you also, koinonion, fellowship, ekete, might have. Now you're gonna see that to turn an indicative ending, present active indicative ending, into a subjunctive ending, lengthen the coupling vowel. Pretty simple. And that's what we have here. So instead of o ace a amen eta, it's omen eta oc, right? Piece of cake. Might have. So who might have? You might have. So in order that you also might have fellowship with us. So he is preaching the gospel story so that we, I think we could be included in this, we might have fellowship with who? Him. You'd expect, with us, the apostles. You'd expect him to say, we're preaching this message so you can have a sharing, a partnership with Jesus. Wouldn't you expect him to say that? That's not what he says. He's saying, we're sharing this message so you can have a connection with us apostles. Do you know that you cannot connect to Jesus? You and I cannot connect to Jesus apart from the apostles. Did you know that? How are you going to connect to Jesus?
What do you mean by that?
Have a relationship with Jesus. You and I cannot have a relationship with Jesus that doesn't depend on the apostles. How are you going to have a relationship with Jesus? How?
Through his word.
Through His Word. Where do we get the Word?
Holy Spirit.
Through mostly the apostles, or close associates with the apostles. But why was Mark's gospel accepted? Because of his close association with an apostle. Right? So we today depend on the apostles for our relationship with God. Now, it's not like the Catholic thing, where Peter gets to be the first pope, and then somebody took over for him, and there's a succession in that way. The difference between the way we look at it and the Catholics look at it, well, you'll look at it this way after we're finished, I'm quite sure, is that our connection is directly with the apostles through the Word of God. Now, you might not see a Bible, and I might tell you about Jesus, you can have a relationship, but somewhere along the line, somebody's relying on the Word of God here, right? On the New Testament. And we're dependent on the apostles for the New Testament, and even its canonization within the church, because the church looked at apostolic authority to recognize the inspiration of a book and call it a New Testament book, right? I mean, let's not be too anti-Catholic. We are, dependent on apostolic succession. Only the apostolic succession goes from the apostle to me and to you and everybody individually, right? Through Scripture. It's quite amazing that he says that we are preaching this message to you so you can have fellowship with us and not fellowship with Jesus. That's quite amazing. Carry on though, it says, and the fellowship, that's and even, or also, the fellowship, hemetera. It's so cool that word is in there. Why is it so cool that word is in there? Because I just taught you that is a what? Good guess, but no.
I'll fill you in. It's
Well, it was cool, thanks. No, I'm teasing. No.
a verb of something.
No, try a possessive adjective.
How about possessive adjective?
Oh, yeah.
Possessive adjective. All right. So hemetera. Look at how hemetera, which means ours, is in the same gender, number, and case as koinonia. Right. So and also the fellowship, our fellowship. What? Meta tu patros. With the Father and with His Son, Jesus Christ. So the apostles are partnered with the Father and the Son, and when we partner with the apostles, we have access through them to the Father and the Son. And we partner with the apostles through the New Testament. All right?
What's this note at the bottom? Do you know what that's about?
Well, some manuscripts say humon. Where's that? In verse 4?
Okay. Well, because I didn't know what that. Like I said 4. I'm like, is that for a note 4 or what? But now I get it.
Oh, I don't get it yet. Yes, I do.
It's for the hamon right there at the.
Oh, the little cross
Yeah,
thing.
the little cross.
Okay, gotcha. Okay. See, this doesn't have a textual. I mean, that's the closest thing that we come to a textual apparatus. But I will look in my other Bible, which has a textual apparatus, and we'll check that out in a moment. Okay. Huh? In the NIV.
Well, we can just sell this right now. Have an NIV.
Yeah. All right. Verse number 4. What is that?
This.
These, and it's neuter plural. These things.
In order that.
Okay, we are writing. Now, humes, we, right? Humes, have you had humes?
Yeah.
Hemes, hemes, hemin, hemon, hemas. Hemes, hemon, hemen. I thought I got that backwards. Why did I get that backwards? Hemes, hemon, hemen, hemas. Right. Because the dative is going to have a neota form, and the hemon is consistent in the genitive, right? It's plural. So this is, sorry, I confused you. This is we, but it's humes, so it means it's nominative. So this is the subject, we. And we are writing these things. These things is the direct object. That's the accusative case. Could be nominative in form, but it's in usage it's accusative, we know, right? Okay, so we are writing these things, hina, in order that, purpose again, he kara, your joy. Now, I'll need to let you know that A is a present subjunctive of a me. Might be, right? So knowing that that's a present subjunctive of a me, third person singular. Now let's look at pleromene. Now again, we want to dance in our chairs right now because we have learned this, we know this. First of all, pleromene. What tense is this? Okay, you got to be able to jump on this till it squeezes the juice out of it, right? Pepleromene. Okay, it's perfect. Pep, right? You were thinking perfect, weren't you? You were. Okay, I know you were. Okay, so this is a perfect, right? Now, what's it from? Plerao. There you go. That was one of our vocabulary words for today, for tonight, right? So it's a contract verb, plerao. All right? So we know it's perfect. Now, is it perfect active, middle, or passive? It's passive. Now, it's middle passive form, but so we're going to hang on to a middle passive form, and when we look in the context, we find out, you're a step ahead of us here. We find out that it's passive, right? So we have a perfect, passive. Now, what's the ending? We know it's passive, but mene. Perfect, passive. Okay, perfect, passive. My, sai, tai, methus, tai. Sino, mene. What could it be? Participle. There you go. It's a perfect, passive participle. Feminine. Why is it feminine? Because it goes with joy, which is feminine. Feminine, nominative, singular. From plerao to fill or fulfill. So, here we have what kind of construction then? A subjunctive of a me and a perfect participle. Periphrastic. Very good. See that? In fact, this is very similar to the periphrastic we looked at in Ephesians 2, right? Because we have a present tense of a me and a perfect participle. See, it makes you want to dance in your chair, doesn't it? Did you just? Yeah, that's all right. Right? So, literally, in order that your joy might be having been made full. Right? Or, I just realized this is the same kind of idea as in Ephesians. In order that your joy might stand full. Now, that's an odd translation, but, in order that your joy might... I don't know. See, this is why you have to learn Greek, because how you can translate. In order that your joy might remain full, or now am I becoming NIV? I don't know. I mean, maybe we should be so hard on the NIV. But, well, okay, now that's our question, right? Okay. Here in our text, it is our joy, right? But now we have a little note that says some manuscripts want to put humon in there so that your joy might be made full. Well, let's just see. I wonder what the translations do. Can you look it up in translation and see what
Okay.
what happens there?
1 John. Hour.
In order that the joy of us might be made full. Okay, so this text is going to agree with this text, so that's interesting. In what? English. Okay. You have our, and it's footnoted your. Okay, and what is yours? What? NAS, and what's that say?
Hour.
Another
Our joy
our
may be
joy.
made full.
Okay, well, now they have, in this textual apparatus, it gives you a letter. It gives you a letter right before the discussion on it. A, B, C, I guess D. And the more sure they are of their decision, the higher the letter. Well, the lower the letter, whatever, the closer to A. At the beginning, I have a footnote, and now it's going to tell me a very short version of the textual history of this. And at the beginning of that, it tells me a letter. And the letter indicates how sure the editors are of their decision.
Oh, okay.
And there's actually, well, the humes in verse 4, there's also some different readings for that. Humin is one. So just like we translated it, and we are writing these things to you. Somebody wants to throw in a to you there, right? Well, in that one they give a B for certainty, so they're pretty certain. But in this other one they give an A, so they're very certain of their decision. Because Hamon, you have two. There are three major texts that carry a lot of weight, and two of those texts agree with the reading of Hamon, but one of them agrees with the reading of Humon. And you have all kinds of
Say which one? Is
Humon is text A, which is, and there was a time when I knew all of these, and I'm trying to remember. The Aleph text that we have agreeing with Hamon is Sinaiticus, right? I think that is. Then you have Vaticanus, which might be the A text, and then you have. Oh, that's the B text? Okay. So those two, see, you're looking in the place where I should be looking. Those two agree with Hamon. So what's the A text then?
A text would be the Alexandrian.
Yeah, the Alexandrian text. There you go. All right. So there is. It's kind of funny. There is a separation of the major texts. What's C, by the way?
Ephraimi Receptus.
Yeah, that's not a very familiar text, but. So anyway, there's a textual issue there. It'd be interesting to know what the King James Bible does. We had to have one around just to, make reference to it. There's got to be one around here.
But there's one right there.
We can go get a Spanish Bible probably for you.
Baptist Church, what King James.
Book of Mormon, NIV.
Does anybody have an NIV?
I would admit to it if I did.
I'm sure they reverse engineered this, so I'm sure the NIV agrees with the New American Standard. Got a new King James. All right, let's see what the textual thing in the King James will tell us.
I was sending that around.
But read verse 4 and we'll know what they did.
These things
Here he goes.
that your
Okay.
joy may be full.
Okay, did you get that? The majority text, the King James, goes with both of these other readings. These things we write, instead of we being the subject, it's these things we write to you, right? That your joy, it says?
Your joy.
Your joy. Yeah. So the majority text goes the opposite direction. See, 1 John is one place where there's a lot of difference between the King James, compared to other books. So there's a lot of difference between the King James and the New American Standard, for example, or the critical
Yeah,
text.
going to talk a little bit about that, like, ever.
Yeah,
Like, majority
if you want.
text and, or sort of, I guess.
I'll tell you about it really quick right now if you want to. I think I can do it very quickly, but I'll tell you about it very quickly. There are two philosophies of how to deal with text, and really, I think I'm right. We got to turn the camera off. I think I'm right about this stuff. No, it's all right. The earlier way of looking at text is consistent with the majority text, and as the name implies, how you deal with it is you have all these. You really have hundreds or thousands of manuscripts of the New Testament. Not necessarily full manuscripts, but fragments and all kinds of stuff like that, right? So you've got all these myriads of manuscripts that you're looking at, and they pretty much agree, but some of them represent different readings, right? All right. So the earlier philosophy is, well, you got 100 texts you're looking at, and 90 of them read one way, and 10 of them read another way. Well, obviously, you're going to go with the 90, right? Only makes sense. Majority text. All right? But then we began to ask, but what about the quality of these manuscripts? Right? In other words, if you could just sort of, visualize a possible history of a text, you could possibly have two texts, right? Sitting here, and how good is the text? Well, it depends on how good the scribe was, for one thing.
but it also, it depends, and by good you can mean a lot of different things. How skilled that scribe was, or how much of a tendency did that scribe have of not only error but deliberately changing things. And there are some manuscripts that clearly like to deliberately change the text. A lot of times scribes wanted to change the text to remove problems from the text, logical problems, theological problems, grammatical problems, right? And so they might, some scribes felt freer to change the text. Well, what we want is not necessarily a more logically consistent text or any other more consistent text. We want the same text, right? So let's say you have one text over here that is more like the original text than text B, because the scribe who did text B has a penchant for changing things. Well, what if text A is tucked away and treasured? You can almost imagine why it would be treasured more, maybe even as a more valuable text in some sense. Maybe text A is tucked away someplace and kept safe, where text B gets all over the place and is copied a whole bunch of times. See? Now you begin to see why the number of copies of a text doesn't necessarily mean it's a better reading.
The majority text guys would look at that the opposite, that the reason why these copies aren't as prevalent is because they weren't as good, and so people didn't bother to copy.
And that's true, but that's not the science that this is based on. The science that textual criticism is based on is, let's objectively look at the text, because you can look at the text and you can make determinations throughout the text. This scribe clearly had a penchant for changing things. And they also put texts into families. By the various readings, you can tell how tedious this would be, and also how brilliant it'd have to be to deal with this kind of stuff. But texts who tend to read like this will be in this family. And maybe this family of texts, it likes to change things. This family doesn't. So there are certain texts which are deemed in textual criticism to be more reliable than other texts. And then you can say, well, this text belongs to this family of texts, and this text belongs to this family of texts. And if this text belongs to a more reliable family of texts. And there are all kinds of rules for textual criticism, that you look at, because, and it comes down to, and some of it is certainly conjecture, but what would be the tendency of a scribe? The tendency of a scribe would not be to add a logical problem to a text, right? The tendency of a scribe would not necessarily be to make the text more complicated, unless he's trying to fix a problem. Maybe the tendency of a scribe is to make it more simple,
So do you think the scribes were scholars of what they were scribing?
Oh yeah. Yeah, you had to be a scholar to get a job as a scribe. I mean, you didn't just go find somebody that had good handwriting as a copy of text. That was a job. That was a career, and it would take about a year. It takes about a year for somebody to handwrite an Old Testament parchment for a synagogue.
With a lot of the really old manuscripts, though, they were just laymen who, even a lot of times, they were
Oh, of course.
out in church.
Absolutely.
Right?
Well, yeah, sure, of course. And someone who is not skilled at copy, you just go try to copy a page of something, handwritten,
Yeah.
and then go back and see if you make mistakes. I mean, there is a skill in terms of copying them. So if it is just a lay person copying it, maybe you don't get as high a quality text at that point. And remember, you're dealing with all capital letters with no spaces. So where do you divide the word? Well, where do we divide the word? That's an editorial thing. But that's the whole thing. So the King James Bible is based on the philosophy of the majority text, where you basically, and I'm probably oversimplifying this, but basically you count the number of texts with this reading, and the one with the most texts, the reading with the most texts, is the one you go by.
I've spent a lot of time with St. Hodges and Bob Wilkin,
And they're probably majority text guys, aren't
they're
they?
majority text guys, and I don't know, I've heard a lot of their arguments, and it's a lot more complicated than that.
I'm sure it is. But the bottom line is, how does it change my life with God and my theology, whether he write it to you or he just wrote it, or whether it's for his joy or my joy? It doesn't matter, yeah. But I mean, is it going to change me from a Calvinist to something else? Probably not. And there just aren't textual issues like that I mean, you know, the ambiguities of grammar where it says either you are choosing the greater gifts in Corinthians, implied that's a bad thing, or an imperative because it's an ambiguous form, choose the greater gifts. Now that's a big, you know, that's just a grammatical ambiguity. That's not a textual thing. But that one makes me a Baptist or a Assembly of God guy, you know. So that one's a little bit more important. But that's not textual criticism. That's just the grammar. All right. I don't know. In my opinion, the textual criticism issue is of course very important for particular readings and exegesis of a passage. But in terms of my theology and my walk with God, it's virtually irrelevant. And so that's why I'm pretty comfortable just grabbing my. I mean, you know what? If you want to use a majority text, you know, have at it. You know, I mean, we're going to come out in the same place.
I like the New King James because it tells me. You know, the other Bibles they don't tell you, but
Yeah.
the New King James the majority text reads blah blah blah, or in New text reads blah blah blah, or whatever. And,
Yeah, I think there's actually a lot of virtue to the New King James Bible, to be honest.
it's a good Bible. It's
I do
fine.
too. Well, it might be that we could standardize on that a little bit, which would be helpful. But that last part's extra stuff. Okay, so see how far you can get in the next paragraph of 1 John, the rest of the chapter actually.